Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Pullman Police Advisory Committee on today, April 12th. I am Stephanie Rink, the chair. Appreciate everyone being here today. If all of our PAC members can please make sure that your names are clearly written on your Zoom window. That way Darby can take attendance. And if you are not able to do that, please let Darby know by reaching out to her via email. Our first order of business is the approval of the minutes. We don't have quorum at the moment, but does anybody have any comments or questions or edits with the minutes from March 8th? Okay, as soon as we reach quorum, then we will come back to that. But we do have our wonderful guest speaker, Annie Pillars. Thank you very much for being here today, that you are going to talk to us about suicide prevention and the Resiliency Task Force about Practice the Pause. So Annie, I'm going to turn this over to you. Annie, we can't hear you.
If you click on the little arrow down by the microphone on the bottom left, you can select what microphone you're using if the wrong one's selected.
How's that?
That's better.
Magic. Thank you, Gary, for coming to the rescue in so many ways. So thank you for that. Appreciate you. I haven't worked on this system with, you guys are using different than Zoom, so thanks for that clarification. So I want to thank you for letting me be here. I had a chance to visit with a number of you a couple years ago, and I wish that we were together in person today, but it's a nice opportunity to be here now. And so Gary asked me to talk about a couple things with you, both the Whitman County Suicide Prevention and Resiliency Task Force and a new program that's come out called Practice the Pause. So if I'm as successful as I was when Gary was giving me good direction, I'm going to try to share the screen now as well and see if I can make that happen. And I know how to do that on my end. Let me see if I can do that on this end. What do you see now? A PowerPoint slide?
We see it. Looks like it's working great.
Okay, good. So I will try to make that happen for myself as well. So, you know, when I was thinking about what do we call this, what are we doing as a people in Whitman County, and really what we're doing is we're building resiliency. We've learned the importance of that in the last number of years, but I think COVID has really been part of that. And Gary can attest to this. One of the amazing things that we've watched for the last 15 months is people working together to make a difference. And really together we can. And this really gives a good example of what that looks like in terms of resiliency. So starting in 2019, we were really seeing some very sad things happening in terms of suicide and the rate of that in our county. And so that's how the task force came to be. But it's about resiliency as well. And even though there's suicide in there and we talk about death, this is really about living well. That's what resiliency is about. If you don't live well, you lose your life in a lot of different ways, don't you? And that's why we feel this is so very important. What happened for us was we watched many times over, and so was the police department, the wake of trauma that follows a death by suicide. We watched communities not know what to say to the family. We watched families wonder if they missed something. And that's how the task force came to be. We are truly a community of communities. And what I mean by that is I live in Palouse, others live in Pullman, some live in Colton. So we have a community where we live. We have a community where we work. We might have a community where we play or where we worship. So the task force is a community of communities. And that keeps us healthy. It keeps us better represented throughout the county. Our absolute focus is to really develop rural, small town self-care and resiliency. What does that look like when you've had 3 weeks of snow? How do you stay resilient, and what's self-care look like in a rural area if transportation is difficult, roads get closed? What about neighbor care? I've lived here 31 years, and one of the things that I've learned is that neighbors take care of neighbors here. And that's what's beautiful. So we're trying to help the neighbors that are taking care of neighbors have some tools to watch when we're maybe becoming weary with our resiliency. So it's about neighbors being out there and working together. There's a core team that started the task force, and you were privileged to have Mike Burney here at your last meeting. And Mike is one of our core members with Palouse River Counseling, along with Rhonda Allinger, who works with Mike regularly. And then we have Corey Lahorie, who is a pastor out in Palouse. He's also on the ambulance squad, and he's a mental health first aid instructor. And he used to work on suicide prevention line, and then myself. And then very quickly, we broadened this to our community of communities. Gary was invited, Mike Heston was invited. People from the library system were invited. Healthcare providers were invited. So it's broad representation all across the county, from people that live out in Hay and La Crosse to people that live in Colton and Uniontown. Some of them are farmers, some of them are pharmacists, some of them are students, some of them are moms, some of them are dads. So it's people like you and me that are neighbors caring for neighbors. So that's how we've come to be. We've added members over the course of the last year and a half that have an interest in and have a heart for this. So we're really about building partnerships and willing neighbors that are willing to be available for their community. It's about finding compassionate people that are connected. So in our smaller communities, what we have found is often it's a person that's on the fire or ambulance squad. They're known to be a safe person. They're known to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're known to be available. So we have folks that are in locations that are connected to their communities and are trusted members of their communities. We're about sharing resources with one another, offering trainings. So for example, before COVID hit, the police department in Pullman, Gary sponsored a number of mental health first aid classes. And he would share that out with the task force so that someone from another area could maybe come to that if they couldn't make it to a local one. So again, just sharing those resources of what's particularly available, as well as developing resources to share within our communities. And really it's about opportunities and those resources. So we have offered mental health first aid classes and youth mental health first aid classes, as well as QPR. And QPR, it's a really simple one. It stands for question, persuade, and refer. And Gary actually did that for his administrative staff. I think it's probably been a year and a half ago, Gary, you would know better. And he's also done the mental health first aid classes. I do want to clarify, when you hear the term youth mental health first aid, or it says YMHFA, that is discussing behavioral health issues for youth and children. It doesn't mean that it's being taught to youth or children. The mental health first aid program is a national program, and it's offered to adults that are working in a variety of settings, including in youth settings. I would love to see a youth program get started for high school students that could be mentors to each other. I think that's done informally in a lot of ways, but right now mental health doesn't have that particular program. And again, providing some tangible hands-on resources. And so we have developed a suicide prevention wallet card that I'll show you in just a minute. And we've actually given out about 5,000 of those throughout the county. Well, in fact, here it is right here. I wish this slide was a little bit bigger. What I've done for you is it's two-sided. So the green side is on one half of it, and then the red side is on the other half, and it fits into a wallet. And really what we wanted to do was give some people direct resources. If it's that neighbor that's your trusted person that you go to when you're in trouble, how does the neighbor help you get the resources that you might need, or have the words that might be helpful to you in that moment? So one side of the card is someone seriously considering suicide. What would you do? First of all, make sure that you're safe, right? That would be really important. Stay with that person, remain calm, right? Listen non-judgmentally. If you're not with them, stay on the phone with them. Stay on if they're texting to you. Offer to offer to call a support line for them, ask them if they have a plan. These are very common things that we know about, but sometimes our next door neighbor doesn't know. So we're helping them understand what to do if they've got a friend that's in trouble. The crisis lines directly, the suicide lines to call to help them do that. The red one is someone that is actively considering suicide. First thing it says is to call 911. It's really important to do that. State, that you're with someone that is actively considering or attempting suicide, what's happening with them. Again, make sure that you're safe, but it gives direct resources to that person. What we've seen so far with those 5,000 is they have gone to the police departments, to the fire departments, WSUs, fraternities and sororities have taken a lot of them. The entire Pullman High School got a copy. Bob Maxwell asked for one for every single one of his high school students. Thought that was really something on his part. So it's just a resource that's out there, and that came from the task force. I'm going to pause for a minute and just ask for questions specifically about the task force, if there are any.
Hi, this is Nathan Dean. Do you have a website?
And hi, Nathan.
Hi. Do you have a website for your organization?
We're not much of an organization. We're a community of communities, Nathan. We're not an official nonprofit or anything, so we do not have a website at this point. I'm starting to realize maybe that's going to become important to do, but we have not started that yet.
Yeah, I kind of just asked because I like that, wallet handout that you have, but in today's day and age, especially with younger folks, I think they're more likely to be able to access this stuff on the internet than have that on their person when they need it or remember where it is a year from now.
Right. That's a great idea. I will explore how we would make that digitally, and can it get onto a person's phone? Something like that is probably what you're thinking about potentially, Nathan. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no, that's a great, I was thinking about the website, but I hadn't thought about the in your hip pocket kind of a thing in terms of electronically. So thank you for that suggestion. Yeah. So then I'm going to talk a little bit about Practice the Pause. This is pretty new. This has come out from Greater Columbia Accountability of Health. And it's a program that was put together through the Department of Behavioral Health at the state level by one of their psychologists. And this is directly connected to COVID-19 and the response that we have seen and it was anticipated related to anxiety and depression and just maybe anger, expectations that we didn't think would happen, the long drawn out part of this, and what's that done for families and for children, for workers and co-workers. And so Practice the Pause is an opportunity for, let's say, employers or organizations to use to help each of us learn to pause when we're starting to have anxiety, depression, behaviors build up. And it's really about thinking and doing and being, skills for managing our emotions and building resiliency, giving tools to 8-year-olds on how to handle their behaviors. I would encourage you, I will try to put this into the chat, although I'm not seeing a chat here from me, Gary. Maybe you could share that website at some point. Yeah, I'm not seeing that chat. But Practice the Pause is an opportunity to develop our own tools for ourselves. So how they describe Practice the Pause is encouraging ourselves to stop in the moment between a feeling and a reaction to think about why we're feeling the way we are. And I think about that, and that's kind of a trick, isn't it? Stop between the feeling and the reaction. And that does take practice. That takes encouragement to do. It allows us to understand maybe what's causing our reaction and choose how to maybe respond in a different way. And there's tools for that. Again, I'm not going to show this because I don't think I have a way to do it, but they have 30-second and 1-minute videos that are directed to different age groups, children, teens, and adults. And it starts developing what this might look like for them. One of the things I like about Practice the Pause is that it's very easily implemented in the school setting. There's a section for 5-year-olds to 12-year-olds, and it has lots of workbooks. It has stickers. It has coloring opportunities. So a teacher could use this, let's say when the class is getting, just kind of a lot of energy going on. It's an opportunity for them to pause and practice a tool for how to manage their own feelings and emotions. For teenagers, it's very directed to journaling. And for adults, it's got a workbook that they can use. So we are trying to get that implemented through the library systems. You're seeing a lot of grandparents that are taking care of their grandchildren. And the workbooks for the little guys are a fabulous opportunity for grandparents to talk to their grandchildren about what their responses might be that they're having. One of the things that we're seeing skyrocket is anxiety and depression for families right now since COVID started. And the Practice the Pause talks specifically about that and ways to address that. So it gives some tools for what are our thinking skills for changing our unhealthy thoughts or behaviors, and actions, doing skills for the little guys on how to increase our resiliency. And then even thinking about what would make me happy in this moment. What could I do for myself to care for myself in the best way? Very simple and straightforward things to do. You are seeing that right now being done through the hospital in Pullman. They are starting to do Practice the Pause and having those tools available in the waiting room, and families are waiting for someone that's in the hospital. Just little ways to help implement some ways to take care of ourselves. I do want to thank you guys for letting me be here today. And I want to tell you, I'm always very impressed with what I've watched the police department in Pullman do. Gary regularly sends me notes about, have you seen this? Have you seen that? If there's opportunities for trainings or events that they're doing, always sharing that. And our task force is comprised of people that are active within their community of communities that are working to make a difference. And what I've witnessed in this last year has been tremendous related to that.
Annie, thank you so much for your presentation. Do we have any questions for Annie?
I was just curious about the data collection. So much of what we've been able to work with, the Pullman Police Department has done an excellent job collecting data, making it available to make kind of evidence-based informed decisions. I was just curious about your assessment of how Pullman or Whitman County is doing in terms of data collection and using those data to make informed decisions.
So let me make sure. So what arena are you speaking of related to that?
Just thinking about in terms of mental health services, in terms of utilization and successful interventions. Just thinking more broadly about just what type of data the county collects and what it uses to make informed decisions.
Right. I may not be a good person to ask that question to. I would suspect that the Department of Health would have that, but more likely our State Department of Health is collecting that data. And I would think that Mike would have that answer better than I would. I apologize. I don't do that part of it. Yeah.
No, it's helpful. I think that
Yeah.
this is one of the things that we've been talking about as a committee is, how we can leverage data and where there's an opportunity to think about broader data collection efforts.
Yeah. It's interesting you're asking me that because about a week ago we were on a conference. It was a video conference, Northwest Rural Health, and it's specifically about rural health. And there was one of the statisticians from the State Department of Health there, and we were actually talking about the task force. And he talked about wanting to collect data. And what he was talking about is when you have reduced impact, you know, let's say less suicides for just a moment, if we were counting that. If there are less of those, that's data that can actually be collected, even though it's not a number per se, right? It's a reduction over time. And so the State Department actually is very, very keen on knowing that. And the impression I got was that the way they were going to do that is through the local level when they asked us that question. And I think that's a healthy way to do that, right? Yes.
Thank you.
Chief Jenkins, you wanted to say something?
Andy, can you talk for a minute about some of the discussions that have happened to leverage the collaboration that's gone on to address COVID-19 in our region and applying that to mental health in the area as well?
Yes, it's really been very heartwarming. Honestly, you know, it's been a tough year, right? But I've never seen more people pulling the rope the same direction. It's just been incredible. And it's people that have not worked together before. I mean, you've got people from county level, state level, higher education, nonprofits, you know, community action center, people that don't always sit at the table together, sitting at the table together. And it started because of COVID, didn't it? And addressing one problem at a time. And once that problem was solved, what's the next thing that we need to deal with? Well, that has really jump-started now into mental health issues. And so not very long ago, and yeah, actually Gary was there as well. It was about a month ago now. This is sort of maybe the kickoff, you might say. WSU sponsored what's called a listening roundtable related to behavioral health. And I'm trying to say that because that really is a better approach to behavioral mental health, right? And how do we can help ourselves. And at that roundtable, there were members from the task force as well as from all across the county. And so right now what you're seeing is the same effect of pulling the rope the same direction is now being done related to behavioral health issues. So for example, at that task force, that roundtable discussion, there was a gal from WSU that is doing mental health first aid through a national grant program. And we connected soon after that, and it looks like right now that they're going to fund for the Whitman County task force here, more instructors for mental health first aid and for QPR. And without that connection, that wouldn't have happened. There was another person that came from one of the communities out in Endicott. And what we're seeing is that together we can, and together we are. And that's a credit to the people that are sitting at the table that aren't only looking at their silo. Whitman County works well together because we work well together, and we can make a difference. What one learns, either whether it's by failure or success, another can learn from, and we're willing to share what works and what hasn't worked. And so I feel very hopeful about that. One of the things that's really important to me is, because I see this, particularly after there's been a suicide, what I see, particularly in our smaller communities, we're going to see that family at the store. We're going to see them at the grocery store or at the gas station. People don't know what to say or what to do. What we're looking for is a way to support the community as they support that family. And I believe that that is going to be much better informed and much more effective because of the collaboration that we're seeing now being directed towards behavioral health issues that has been very put together because of COVID issues. Gary, anything you have related to that? I'm assuming that's what you were thinking about.
No, that was exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm very excited because, you know, each person brings something important to the table, and each person has a connection to someone else. And earlier when I was talking about the task force, I talked about community connections. A person doesn't get well on their own, and they don't get sick on their own. There's a whole host of people that are beside them and maybe not recognizing what's happening, or not knowing who to reach out to, or not knowing whether they should reach out. So we're trying to develop the confidence that neighbors have to help each other, but also the place to go when it's beyond what they can do. Where are those local resources to help that person?
Thank you. Are there any other questions from our audience?
I mean, even what you guys do is all collaboration, right? You know, it's great that Gary has you because you're eyes and ears, right? And you're a caring community of your own.
Yeah, I do find that we collaborate, all of us really in our own networks quite extensively in this county, which is really remarkable for everything we do.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for letting me be here today, and I hope the rest of your meeting goes very well for you.
Thank you, Annie. We greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Annie.
Bye-bye now.
All right, so next up is talking about the community survey discussion, Dr. Macon.
I believe that's Chief Jenkins. I mean, by and large, I mean, we can develop it. What we need to do as a committee today is decide the path forward. So coming out of the summit, we had the recommendation for a community survey. And so what remains to be discussed is it a broader public safety survey of Pullman, or is it a survey that's directed towards those that interact directly with the Pullman Police Department? So these would be citizen contact surveys, or would it be some mixture of both? Inevitably, the chief needs to make a request for funds to support it and to have it become institutionalized. And so we need a direction on what the committee would recommend moving forward so that the chief can take that under consideration to request funds to, if we decide or the police department decides to implement the community survey.
David, do you want to just walk us through what this survey would look like and what it would entail when someone takes it?
Yeah, so I guess the two paths, as I said, and we've worked up the examples. So Megan Parks, she's conducted background research on the most common questions that are asked on a community survey. And so the community survey is really that. Think of it as a public safety climate survey. Now, you can do that directly. So you could say, okay, we just want to know about how the community feels about public safety. Though one of the practices that often occurs is that the city will ask about other types of services, right? Really, so it's like baselining or creating and measuring around just assessing some type of climate, right? And so it could be about government services, aspects of good governance. And so those are it's an amalgamation of many different questions that really gets to the climate of whatever you're trying to understand in your community. The idea being that it's there's different modalities for it, one of which you could think about enrolling particular families, and it's kind of a cohort, right? So there's a lot of different ways that this can be done. We can generate estimates, and depending on what we all recommend as a committee and what's ultimately decided, we'll be able to generate what the actual cost of that would be. But think of it as very much a climate survey, right? The other pathway that was also recommended is really those that have direct contact. So this would be, those that are pulled over by police officers for, traffic infraction. If there's a call for service that comes out, so someone dials 911, the police go out. And these can target those that, have contact with the police, right? They're a consumer of resources. And they can be targeted at those that are accused of crimes, victims as well. So it's really soliciting information about the experiences with a Pullman police officer. So these are considered to be contact surveys. And there's a variety of different question types that would go into them, but you can think of them in many ways. What was your experience with this officer, as well as baselining, did an officer do all of the things that we would want them to do? Right? So often these are framed around like procedural justice, right? So did the officer tell you the reason for the stop? Did they explain to you the reason? Did they allow you to have some input, some dialogue, some exposition around the stop? Did they direct you to the next steps? So this is what's going to happen. So there's these very objective expectations for what an officer should do, and they will vary by contact type. So there's certain things that you might do in a DUI that you wouldn't do in another contact. But by and large, they're really about how did you feel about that interaction with a Pullman police officer. And then you can also assess what did that officer do or not do in that particular encounter. So those are kind of the two general pathways that you'll see surveys in terms of police practice. There's benefits to both, but I think that one of the most pressing things for us, and I've made this mention before, is that if you do it, it cannot be a one-off. It's not something that you can simply implement, get data back and go, here's where we're at, and then not do it again. And this is why having that conversation around, would we as a committee be in support of that recommendation to, one, implement a survey, whatever it might be, or it could be both, and we can get estimates on costs. But it's also that commitment to say that we'll do this, every year or every other year or every 3 years, but we need to have consistent data collection, or in many ways it can be meaningless. It can be a snapshot of where you're at, and then that's not really helpful for anyone.
And another question, so the two different surveys, who would be responsible for putting out those surveys and then reviewing all the data?
So, as of right now, we have, you can fall within some aspects of the fellowship, but there is a real cost to surveying either of these, to make them, ongoing, and then to have time to be able to do the sampling, to be able to do the data analysis. So we have to generate estimates for that. But most likely the Division of Governmental Services, DGSS, I would imagine leading that effort. They field these types of surveys all throughout Washington for different counties. So it would just make sense to involve them.
Chief Jenkins, did you want to speak to anything about that?
Well, when Dr. Macon talks about doing different types of surveys and he asks me which one I want, I just say yes, because I want to have it all. But I do want some input from this group to help guide, this whole project. And we did, Dr. Macon and I talked about the possibility of perhaps maybe at the next meeting going into depth a little bit more to talk about different types of surveys and really work on coming up with a recommendation for moving forward.
One point to add to that about the reason we haven't built the instrument is because fundamentally what came out of the summit was that the community wanted to have input on developing. And so we feel we'd be better served to have the community have an input to guide what type, the path, right? So even that, right, we have to decide, if we're going to recommend both, then fine. But if as a, consensus as a committee, we say, well, we really think that content-based survey would be more important right now. It's not to say that we won't do the climate survey, but it's really about, this is the priority that we would recommend, and then we could really engage all of the different communities that are represented here to be able to decide what are those most pressing questions that we want. We have a variety of samples that we can share, but we really want to have a direction from the committee, and then we can go ahead and share all that information out, give people enough time to look it over, to have some thought on what they would like to have. And there might be a series of questions that we hadn't thought about that is really important for Pullman that just it just wouldn't show up in other contexts.
Nathan?
Yeah, thank you. I guess to answer that question for me personally, I would kind of want to know what issue or issues this committee thinks is most important to address. I think that will inform what survey you have, because if you just have surveys to have surveys, like Dr. Macon pointed out, like that doesn't make much sense for anybody's time just to have a survey just to not be studying with some purpose that you're going to maintain. It sounds like if it's going to be something that's worthwhile, it's going to take a significant investment in time and money. And so if you're going to invest time and money into something, it should probably be a top priority. So I'm wondering what issue it is that the committee thinks that, you know, is most pressing that should be addressed, or it wants to be looked into when we're thinking about surveys. I mean, I'm interested to hear from the community and the rest of the committee. For me personally, you know, I think that racial justice right now is a huge issue in our nation. I think it's an issue here too, like anywhere else. And that's something that I would like to see captured in that survey somehow. And I don't know if either of those two versions that Dr. Macon just talked about would be something that could address that, but that's a top priority for me as a committee member, and something I'd like to see addressed. And if we're going to spend time and money, that's what I'd like to see addressed in a survey. But those are my thoughts on the issue.
Thank you, Nathan. Any others?
Hi, my name is Cameron. I'm the president of Blti. And I agree with what Mr. Nathan was saying about focusing, if we're going to do the survey, definitely focusing more on the social justice issues. And like also, like I look at the reports that are given out like bi-weekly and stuff like that. And something that I've also seen was like the traffic infractions, stuff like that. So I think that should also be something that's targeted.
Great, thank you. And can you pronounce your name for me one more time, please?
Yeah, it's Cameron.
Cameron, okay, thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. Any other comments?
So something I'll add, and I would encourage everyone to provide input, because I think the chief really does need this. I mean, I'm trying to kind of stay back in that I don't want my role as a professor and an expertise in this to dominate it. I really want the community to really guide this. And, you know, to Cameron's point, you know, I will say that 2 or 3 years ago, Chief Jenkins participated in it was a unique project for the Washington State Traffic Safety Commission, where we were able to really focus on traffic stops, to get an assessment of what officers, what they undertook in that interaction, and then what the community, we surveyed community members and asked them, or drivers I should say, around what that officer did, how they felt the officer you know, engaged with them. And then we were also able to look at a sample body-worn camera footage to really kind of look at the congruence or incongruence between, you know, what is supposed to occur and then the perceptions of both parties in terms of what, you know, or how it unfolded. So I think that I would echo that point on those community context surveys or police context surveys are incredibly powerful. If you can get them from both officers and the community members to see where there's that congruence or that lack thereof. And does it vary by race, gender, location? You can think about some of the concerns around how officers might interact in, say, College Hill, where you'd be able to look at, you know, are officers treating certain members of the community different, and then being able to kind of validate that through these different measures. And that's something that's commonly done when you have those concerns that Nathan and Cameron have echoed here.
Krista, you had something to say?
Yeah, I did. I think I know what you mean when you said those interacting with the police department, but I kind of think we're all, as consumers of resources, whether I'm observing an interaction, whether I'm at a rally or protest, or, you know, so I guess I don't know how it can be anything other than the general public, but that's just my input.
Barbara?
I'm thinking of it differently. I'm thinking that if we want to be database and we want to, I fear that broad surveys give us generalizations, and that behavior change comes from more specific incidents, and also just given some of the things that we continue to see that are leading all of us to criticize police behavior in some locations, if not here in Pullman. I would lean toward doing doing a direct contact survey so that we can actually get specifics. And I also think that with the kind of thing that Dr. Macon suggested about a direct contact survey, we could have a lot of upfront input from the police officers about what should be asked. I mean, there's legalities of what they need to do if they arrest somebody or stop somebody or tell someone to get off the sidewalk because they're violating an ordinance. But they would be able to offer stuff that we wouldn't think of about how those interactions should proceed. And for me, that feels collaborative in a way that might not make it feel like, well, we're really assessing how you interact with people. That might sound negative, like we're looking to fault find or something. And so I'm thinking having a lot of interaction at the beginning might be good.
Thank you, Barbara. Anybody else? Rocky, Angie, Craig, Joe? Anybody? Go ahead, Eric, and then we'll go to Rocky.
I was just going to say, so on my side, I see benefits of the general, but I tend to think of in terms of that, following up on specific interactions as well. It's sort of like I feel like that different people, I'm sure, have different impressions, but I feel like the general consensus I hear when you get more of a general thing is people like, oh, the police department's great, and they see the whole, they see, and so you hear a lot of things like that, and maybe you hear general recommendations about things that could be done differently, but you don't really get the specific examples of maybe where someone interacted and there's something that happened and it's like, oh, here's actually something we could improve. It's like, it didn't go right in this one instance, and so how can we improve that? So again, yeah, so that's where it's like I look at that the following up on individual interactions as something that's quite important, I guess, in my mind. But
thank you, Eric. Rocky?
So just hearing Eric say that kind of, I just kind of want to piggyback first on what he just said there, is that I'm in some agreement that in general people are just going to, oh, it was a good interaction, or oh, it was an annoying interaction. And so if it's, for the most part, lots of people saying interactions are good, then yeah, we need to really dig into that more information. When it comes to, me thinking about like what questions we want to tackle, like where we really want to focus our energies, kind of my pet project in my head is always going to be on, the mental health focused and related matters. When Darby sends those reports out each week, and I see just how much time and resources is utilized for the mental health specific issues, and just having the speaker here tonight talking about, the various programs that she's doing and what she's encouraging across the board, because it's become such an issue the last couple of years, even prior to the pandemic, and then exacerbated by the pandemic. And so I think ultimately too, everything that we do, we're going to want to have with like that DEI focused lens. And so I think if you focus on how can we ensure that we are, that our vulnerable, like mental health vulnerable populations are getting the best possible outcomes, and how are law enforcement contributing to that, and what ways can we assist law enforcement with doing that when, even if they're well trained, that's not specifically what they're intended to do.
Thank you, Rocky. Any other comments?
I actually had a question for Dr. Macon. will the survey include like the officer's like badge number and stuff like that? So like we know like it's specifically like who like the patron was dealing with?
Also, typically, yes, right? You match those up. So the idea is that you break down. So I think to Rocky's point, absolutely, you break down an interaction into really objective elements, right? So it's not one of the challenges that you see is that when you ask people to evaluate the police, all of a sudden everyone likes the police or they hate them. That's it, right? Like there's no in between that. I love you, hate you. But when you break it down to objective components, you kind of think through, what would we expect an officer to do? So we have, in policing, we talk about procedural justice, and then Chief Jenkins could talk about this ad nauseum. But it's really about, we expect an officer to do the following, right? Introduce yourself. So we ask the citizen, did the officer introduce themselves by their name? Did they ask you your name, right? Did they use your name when they referred to you, right? So, oh, hi, David. I'm Officer so-and-so. And then, did they state the reason that they are interacting with you? So I'm here because I got a call, right? We got a call about this noisy party. We're kind of here just to, and then did they explain the reason? I'm here because this ordinance, and so here's all these factors. And we kind of work through. These are all objective. We're not looking at the degree to which an officer did these. Do you think they did an excellent job telling you their name? Sure, we could ask that, but really what you want to know is, there's like these 9 things that we expect an officer to do, or Chief Jenkins expect his officers do for every single interaction, and that's what you're checking for. And the idea is that, do you see variability based on any particular factor? Take Nathan's point, race. Are officers less inclined or less likely to use, to state the specific reason that they're here, to use their name, right? To ask it, right? To check, I'm actually interacting with the person. The reason you ask for the name is to verify that you're interacting with the person you're supposed to, right? And so you use all of that objective data to really create baselines. And we did a really interesting baseline for Chief Jenkins as he wanted to understand about incivility. So we built a sample of interactions. There were 1 officer, 1 citizen, no bystanders, no other officers, and we looked at dimensions of incivility. So like, for example, directed profanity. And you can have that. Did the officer use profanity in your interaction? Now, the challenge for this is you really want to get both parties, right? You want the officer to self-disclose. Did they do all of these things I just mentioned? You do that because it's part of training. It's letting an officer know that these are the 9 things that you're supposed to do. Did you do them? And then you're asking of the citizen, right? Did they do all of these 9 things? And I'm just making up 9 as an example. But that's this idea behind it. And that's just for an example of procedural justice. And that's supposed to inform every police contact. Every police contact should use procedural justice.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So a little bit of a mini lecture there. You can tell that it's being in the classroom. But yeah, that's the idea behind it.
This is.
Go ahead, Nathan.
Yeah, thanks. Just to comment on that a little bit, Dr. Macon, when we're talking about surveys, I wonder, I know that just naturally humans, especially when it's in a heightened situation, emotional situation, their memory is not always completely accurate, or if not accurate, it's not completely whole, because you have adrenaline and there's lots of, chemical things going on that I'm definitely not trained enough to speak on, but I know that someone's memory in a survey is not actually always going to reflect what actually occurred. And I know that our police department has standards on body camera. They should have body camera footage on for all these interactions that we're talking about. Well, not all of them, but the vast majority of them. And so I wonder how, when you have the body camera footage that is available that you can use to judge a lot of these objective standards, is survey value added for all of the work that goes into it? Are there other things that a survey can capture that you can't capture in body camera footage? Is my question.
That's a great question. I think that, that's one of the criticisms I have of, granted the work that we do in the lab is that, while we deconstruct what happens, right? We can code objectively, did these things happen or not? We're equally as interested in the perceptions of folks, right? So what are the perceptions of the interactions? So part of those context surveys gets at the quality. So I didn't mean to diminish it when I said, it's the how it occurs, but that actually matters, right? You want to understand, do certain members of the community react differently? And we can learn from that. But to get that, you need those perceptions of the interaction. How did you feel about how the officer was interacting with you? And unfortunately, to the best of my knowledge, there's maybe 1-2 studies, of which we did one of those, that was able to do, have the officer's assessment plus the officer's perception of how well they did, the community members, and then to have the body-worn camera footage to bring all those together. And they don't always align up, which is really fascinating when you have a community member that says, they did all these things, and officer's like, I didn't do those things. And then you look at the camera and you're like, which side do they, agree with? But I think the perceptions measures matter. You really want to understand, how do people feel about a given interaction? And there's all time, order. I mean, how delayed should it be? Should it be a day, a week? Where is that acceptable, that tolerance? The other thing is, are you able to get officers to be willing to do this? That was one of the challenges that we ran into, was officer compliance. I think this is why us helping inform, the Pullman Police Department, giving Chief Jenkins some ideas to be thinking about moving forward is, do you roll this out? And you expect that officers would be collecting these data in terms of their own assessment of what they did or did not do in a given interaction. I think that's incredibly important. So I think it's the perceptions plus the objective elements. And then you look for the congruence or the incongruence that's observed in the data.
Any further comments? Nathan?
Yeah, sorry. Just again, personal feedback from me. I agree with what a lot of other people have said, that personally, I think like directed surveys are probably more practical to get things accomplished based on those surveys. So I'm more supportive of that. I've already talked about what I feel is important because for me, my interactions with the police are always really positive here in Pullman. And so I have a positive, view of the Pullman police. I think they do a good job from what I know, but I'm also recognize that I'm not in a community that's historically been oppressed by policing. And so I'm interested, if I'm representing like 2 other communities and my police department's not like that, I'd kind of like to know if that's true or not. And I don't think I could know that from a personal spot. So that's kind of what I'm interested in a survey addressing in some way.
Thank you, Nathan. Any other comments?
Hi, Craig Watt here. Surveys are really complex instruments, and so I guess my thoughts are that I'd want it to be a survey that gets information that we want, and if it's too broad, then we may get information of low quality but high volume. So just understanding what the purpose of the survey is, what kind of information is hoped to be obtained, not specific facts, but how it would help the police department. And I look forward to hearing more about it at a later time.
Thank you, Craig. So I will just add my comment that I agree with the majority, that I would rather see the more direct contact survey that's very objective, but allows for that perception from the community to tell them, how they felt during the interactions of whatever interaction it was. Because I do believe that is important for them to be able to say, not only did they follow all these 9 steps, but how they felt while they were doing it. For example, I could say, hello, my name is Stephanie, but I can say it in very different ways that's positive and negative. So I would like that. That is my preference. Right, Chief, what do you need from us other than that we gave you so far?
Well, let me pass that off to Dr. Macon. What more do we need to do as a group to help move this forward?
I think the plan is kind of just hearing this here. I mean, I can really direct Megan to kind of build out a presentation around here's, and correct me if I'm wrong, really a contact survey, so a police contact survey. And so I can have her build out kind of a presentation that introduces how they're done, some of the options, because there are a myriad of options on how to do them, and really to do them well. And then kind of some grouping of questions just to give the committee some, just a refresher, if you will, about what these can look like. And I think that might be helpful to some what Craig mentioned, just being able to kind of see it, right? So maybe here are the kind of the core domain questions. And then once we kind of have consensus, we could just start building it and then sharing it out through an iterative process so that community has a voice and what it ultimately looks like.
David, I would also like to know, and this might come from Gary also, is the resources, if we want our officers to fill out the survey as well, the resources that they have, time and everything to be able to do that and do it well, and within a, what scope of time after. Because that's one of the things, right, is looking at how long after an interaction do you do that survey?
We could look into that. Gives, like I said, that's part of the pathways. But I know Megan was there today when we were speaking, and she's pretty excited about being able to do it. And she believes she could do it by the next PAC committee.
Okay, perfect.
So Stephanie, what do you think about this? If before our next meeting, Dr. Macon could have Darby send out just kind of like some framework and some sampling questions with the idea that at the next meeting, then Megan can do a presentation about, really what it would look like, and would give all of the Police Advisory Committee members at least a chance to look at maybe some of what the questions would be, and some, time to think about it, and maybe think of some things that they want to add to that.
I think that's a great idea if we can get that way like a week ahead of time. And then also at that meeting present the resources that I had just listed. I think that'd be good.
Is that doable, David?
Yeah, I'm pretty certain that is. I'm just making a note now. And yep.
Great, thank you. All right, Chief, you're up next. What's going on with the police department?
All right, well, let's see if my computer will give me enough resources to make it through the rest of this meeting without cutting off my audio. So speak up if something starts going weird here as I'm talking. So as far as staffing goes, we still have 3 vacancies. And we currently have 2 background investigations actively in progress. And we still have people on the list, but we're really only have the capacity to do two background investigations simultaneously. So we do have two in progress and more to work on. A reminder about the workplace harassment training that's required for all city commission and committee members. If you need the information about how to complete that or have any questions, get a hold of Darby, and she has all the information that you need in order to complete that. But we'll need everybody on the committee to complete that training. And it's only, it's an hour long, I believe. And all of our people have been through it, and it's taught by an attorney that we work with regularly through our insurance carrier, who's very knowledgeable on the topic. And so I think you'll find it's interesting training.
And thank you to some of you who were very quick about getting that done so fast.
You're welcome.
So you may have seen, I don't remember if I've talked about this much before, but we implemented a wellness app. And it's primarily for our staff that provides them a lot of different resources for mind and body wellness, really, and mental health and physical well-being and stress. But there's also a public side to it. It's available in Android and Apple both. If you just Google, or not Google, but go to the search those stores to look for Pullman Police, and you'll see the app. You can download it and you'll have access to the public version of that. And as Annie was speaking tonight and talking about having that info online.
Froze.
Uh-oh. Am I back? Can you hear me?
Yep, you're back.
Okay, sorry about that. We could actually put that suicide prevention card on our public part of that app. And so if anybody downloads it, that would be accessible to them on their phone. The only drawback to that is, people that don't necessarily want a police app wouldn't download it probably, but anyway, we could help provide that resource. On April 6th, last Tuesday, College Hill Association sponsors and hosts a safety walk up in the College Hill core area, and it involves Public Works and police code enforcement, ASWSU, and some other entities, and Pullman Disposal. And we just look at lighting and trash and walkability, sidewalks, that type of thing. And so that's an annual thing that's done. And so we have a list of items that we're all working on. At the last Police Advisory Committee meeting, one of the constituents brought an issue about trash problem has been particularly bad this year in College Hill, particularly on Maple and the surrounding streets. And so I turned my code enforcement crew loose up there. Hopefully, Barbara, you've seen some improvement. Okay, good, thumbs up. So the last thing I have is a COVID-19 update. You may have all heard that we're getting moved back to phase 2 as of Friday. Well, let me back up a little bit. Last week, the county health department issued a public health order that reduced the outdoor social gathering limit from what was 50 statewide or countywide to 10. So that applies only to Whitman County. And that was an attempt to address our increasing numbers. So what happened today was there was a review statewide of all of the counties, and there were 2 metrics that the state looks at. One metric is cases per 1,000, new cases per 100,000 population over a 14-day period. And the other metric is new COVID hospitalizations per 100,000 over a 7-day period. So the first metric we had to be, to remain in phase 3, we had to be under 200 cases per 100,000 population. Our actual number was 210. So if you make that per 100,000 population, it made that 416. So we were over double that metric. However, the governor changed the criteria that you only had to fail one metric to get moved back. They changed it to say you had to fail both metrics to get moved back. However, the other metric that we had 3 hospitalizations over a 7-day period. So translate that per 100,000 population, it puts it at just about 6, which is over the metric threshold of 5. So as a result, effective Friday, we're moving back to phase 2. The county still has their order in place for outdoor social gatherings of 10, which is lower than the phase 2 number of 15. But we get moved back to all of the phase 2 other restrictions as far as businesses and restaurants and those types of things. There are special guidelines for athletic events and outdoor events. So that's the latest on the COVID numbers. The next review will be in 3 weeks on May 3rd. When the county issued their order reducing the social gathering limit, we've been going out and giving warnings because that information is brand new and was not generally known, and information wasn't very widespread. So we've been issuing warnings, and with the intent to only issue infractions if we get a return call. We're going to continue to do that for some time until we are confident that the word has gotten well out and everyone is well aware of what the new restrictions are before we start issuing infractions, or if we get a repeat call after we've already warned someone. So that's all I have.
I'm very excited about that. Nathan, go ahead.
Oh, I just had a question for Gary. Generally, I don't know if this is the time or we do the constituent poll, and then I can ask the question.
Go ahead.
Gary, I was just wondering, with the legislature starting to wrap up, I was wondering if there was any laws that are being passed or are potentially being passed that would affect policing, and also just budget stuff. If there's, potential income coming for mental health or other places like that, that is kind of in the pipeline. If you've heard anything about legislation that might affect your department.
There are some things happening, and it's been a struggle to keep up with them because there's been so many. I think what I'll do is maybe do a report at our next meeting on what has come through. I mean, I know even today there were some votes on the floor where some measures were passed and probably are just waiting for the governor's signature. So I should be able to give a report at our next meeting. But there are some that have passed that are going to impact us.
Great, thank you.
Gary, one of the questions that I had, so I know from the summit we are wanting to get to know our officers as much as possible and have them come through these meetings. When will we do that again?
We can do that next meeting because we just had a shift change.
Okay.
So, March, January, March, yeah. So let me set that up and see who we have working on swing shift now, and we'll get some officers set up.
Perfect. All right, any other questions or comments for the chief? All right, we will move to constituencies poll. Anybody have anything? Barbara?
Just, Gary, I absolutely have noticed that the trash is better. Not perfect, but so much better than last month. So thank you so much for attending to that.
Well, thanks for pointing it out. I think the code enforcement crew takes it as a challenge when they hear about that. So,
and I've seen them up here, and my heart swells with gratitude to see them.
Good to hear.
All right, if there's nobody else, do we have any public comment?
I have one.
Yes.
So my organization, Black Leaders of Transcendence and Influence, is actually having a meeting tomorrow at 5:30, and we're actually going to be talking about incarceration rates. So you guys are more than welcome to attend, and then I'll put my email in the chat if there is one, so that you can email me for the Zoom link.
There is no chat, but if you could send Darby that information, that would be wonderful.
Okay, I'll do that tonight.
Thank you.
And just a reminder to wrap back around to the minutes, Stephanie.
Yes, thank you, Eric. Do we have quorum?
Well, I think we do. Based on my counting, we do.
All right, your count works for me. Right, we didn't have any comments or edits or anything to the minutes. So if everyone approves, or do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Great, the minutes passed. Wonderful. All right, if there's not anything else, our next meeting is May 10th, which we will dig deeper into the survey and we will get that information out at least a week in advance. And then hopefully we'll have some officers at our next meeting to get to know them. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.